This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live with Sinkus. Is that how I say your last name?
It is.
Okay, great. Like, how are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. It's a beautiful morning here, Southwest Florida. So hopefully it'll stay not too hot today.
Yeah, I'm in New Hampshire, so we're already a little chilly. So like one of the things we have a sponsor you can see out there. We listen on Newsly. Newsly is an app that takes this podcast and converts it to audio, so people can stop scrolling and start listening. If you use coupon code GHOST to get 1 month free premium subscription. So we encourage people to listen to this podcast on Newsly after we're off the air. So thank you very much for being on the show. And we typically deal with a lot of creative people. We interview like musicians and artists and film directors, and we think that like what you're talking about, your services, the things that you do, it would help a lot of this. So everybody who's a musician is an entrepreneur. They have their own websites. They sell merch. They do all kinds of things. So I think a lot about can help anybody, business, an artist. We are in business. So that's my kind of pitch for this episode, if that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Obviously podcasting space is a huge part of the visual arts and audio arts space. And so, it's a huge tool and we go beyond that and go, how do we actually get people to listen and love what we're doing? Right. I think that's ultimately most of the musicians, most of the artists, most of the actors and
Yeah.
actresses I know just want to be loved.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is how to market, whether you're selling widgets or whether you're selling CDs. Anything
Hmm.
that you sell is the same kind of, maybe different strategies for artists versus people selling like warehouse type stuff. But so one of the things that was how can you build better leads for my website? Maybe just the whole idea of like how should you even build that website to be able to interact with your art.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, right? And what I think is important when you're talking about website is we need to think about how are our users, how are the people that are going to come to the website going to enjoy it, right? And in the case of music and television and arts, how do we create content that gives them that feeling that they can be involved in it? And so, um, you know, obviously, merch store is a huge part of any business in this space. But there's other ways to drive people in, right? Creating a podcast, creating content specifically geared towards your communities that one of the things I always encourage people to do is let's build a community around what you're doing, right? And that's whether it's business, whether it's entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
How do we build that community so that people come in and we give them value beyond what I can do just by going to your website, right? And so that usually looks like some sort of membership, and I encourage people to always start off with free memberships. I think it's a great tool. And just get people in the community, and maybe once a month you spend a half an hour for your community members exclusively going, let's do a Q&A, right? Give them an opportunity to be engaged with you. And as soon as you start doing that, people see that, you're a real person, right? I think that's, we connect as humans with other humans, and B, you're providing value beyond just buy my stuff, right?
Yeah.
And, we all want to be sold to, but we don't want to be sold to.
Yeah. I mean, people have a tendency, the thing with music, the problem with the musicians, we get people that will listen to our music. Well, we get people that go on YouTube, you get 5,000 views, nobody hits the subscribe, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's
Yep.
this like reluctance to actually hit the button.
Yeah.
And so you'll have fans, I sometimes have had episodes that hit 7,000, 8,000 people, and then like 5 people subscribed. And what I found is you have to ask the people to subscribe. Like you do
Mhm.
have to ask them, but it is, it is kind of like, how do you get that engagement if you get the people watching, but they won't hit the button?
Yeah. Yeah, so, there's a couple of things, right? You mentioned one of them. You have to ask, first of all, right?
Mm,
If you don't ask, nobody will ever take an action on it. The second thing I think that's important to remember is we have to design the content for them, right? It's very, very rarely will somebody hit subscribe on the first video they watch of you. It's likely
mhm,
going to be the fifth, sixth, or seventh video.
okay.
So if we have 7,000 people watching this video, right? How do
Mhm,
we translate those 7,000 people to watch 5 more videos?
mhm,
And so in the case of YouTube, YouTube has playlists, YouTube has tiles that you can put up on your videos at different points, beginning, middle, end, to get people to click towards other videos of yours. In the case of podcasts, it's how do I connect episode to episode, right?
mhm.
So that, people, in all honesty, we are a Netflix culture, right? We binge the things we love, we binge,
Yeah.
and so how do I create that binge worthy moment for my listeners, for my uh you know for the people watching me, and that's the moment we're trying to create. And so, what I think the biggest thing that we struggle with in that is we try and do everything, on the fly, right? It's the busy world. And, so I spend a lot of time, especially with when I run my podcasts, which is built around business. I spend a lot of time actually planning how do we connect the concepts together? How do we talk about something in episode 95 that we also mentioned in episode 65 so people go look for it, right?
Mhm.
And I create those moments to go back and forth video to video to create that binge worthy experience.
That's interesting. But if you have a podcast where you're actually interviewing different guests from different, like I have typically emerging and independent artists,
Hmm.
and I would like to find a way, StreamYard doesn't offer a way to connect a button to do any kind of subscription while you're going live.
Yeah.
Maybe if you go like on the replay, even Anchor doesn't offer that. So it would be better. It would be cool if some of the companies would offer these capabilities, would get more engagement. I'm an IT guy. It's like, well, if you guys created a button to do that, then we could put that in there, but you didn't do that. So it's like, what are we supposed to do?
Yeah, I think it comes down to how you script your episode though too, right?
Mhm,
And this is careful planning. So, so one of the things, I have a very, very strict process of how I set up each episode. And I do an interview show as well. And we're talking to people in all facets of business. And you have to pause and you have to go, okay, so this week we're talking to somebody that's an expert in marketing. We're specifically going to dive down this piece of marketing. How does
mhm,
this piece of marketing tie back to, the 6 other marketers that I've talked to, right? And so, I take that time and I keep notes. I actually have just kind of a long running Word document of the quick, like 3 sentence summaries of each episode with a couple of key points so that I literally, as I'm planning that next episode, I can go, okay, all right, that's the episode we need to talk about. And I create my notes around that. I think we get in this space a lot of times as artists, as creators, that we get comfortable with what we're doing and we
mhm,
do it on the fly. And I firmly believe that when you have a practice of going through and running the episode, I don't like ask my guests to come on and interview them interview them and then we're going to interview the real thing for the show. But I run through, what questions could I have, what media do they have that I can drive some other questions through, what are some anticipated responses that I can expect from them, to drive the conversation. I almost have like a script in play,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And it seems very natural on the episode, but it's all very, very intentional. And that's where we need to get when we're talking about how do we drive engagement, how do we get people involved with what we're doing, we have to be intentional about everything we do, from how we talk to the community, how we schedule our social media, what words and what things we put on our website, when we put things on our website. All make a difference, and it's all about the behavior of the people that are consuming what you're doing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Being an artist and being, primarily, focused with musicians, it's more kind of, I do have preset questions that go to most of the artists I talk to. And that's more kind of from an interview perspective. With the business people I've talked to, I don't have a preset. I kind of go with the questions that they recommend. So one of the questions you posed in that I've seen is the social media based on what works. And so that's, they were talking a lot of things, but like, can they actually show that they've got a proven record that they can generate leads, that they can generate, streams, that they could generate, people who are going to buy the t-shirt, going to buy the merch, rather than just like, there's a lot of people out there will say they can do something and they offer a price, and then there's no evidence, factual evidence that they actually can do what they say they're doing.
It's interesting, right? There's tons of like online certification. Google offers like 15 different certifications perfectly free, right? And people go out and get Google certified and all these different things, and then they call themselves a marketer, and that's okay, right? Everybody's got to start somewhere. But the reality is, as a bit, when you're looking at your content creation as a business, you have to step back and you have to go, who have they worked with? What have they done? Can they show me results, right? True marketers will be able to go and show you the wins and the losses. And I encourage you to ask about the losses when you're going to work with a marketer, right? When is the time that you missed the mark, and what did you do to course correct, right? We obviously, we don't want to leave them in a place where like you screwed up, and but so I always like to put that positive spin on it. But it's, if they're willing to talk about their misses and their strategy to course correct, it's a pretty good indication that they have an idea of what they're doing. The other thing I think is important to remember is you should always be finding marketers that work in a similar space or have worked in a similar space that you're in, so if you're in TV, film, things like that, you want to work with somebody that has that specific set of experience from a marketing perspective. If you're, music, you want to work with people that have a little bit of background or have connections to the music community and understand how music promotions is different than selling widgets.
Yeah, you want somebody like in the music industry today, there's that we have to deal with this thing. People get like $6 penny per stream, right? So the way we make money in music today is through sync licensing, right? So I'm working with a video game director in South Africa on an independent video game. I'm working with other artists on working on music and being paid to do that work, playing bass lines on somebody's record or producing somebody's record. That's how we make the money, right? So for us, having this podcast has given me leads so that I got work on a video game. It got work being a session player, got work doing production. So maybe Family Electric Ghost is not in the top 20 on the chart, but I make money from other ways because people find out about me from this. So that's how I was able to kind of come up with my own strategy. And it kind of just fell into it because I just like music, right? So I just got into it because I believe in it. And then I got into this opportunity and I started getting connections for like Newsly and all these other people. Start noticing that I love what I do. And I've been doing it since 2016. And, I got a certain set of audience that recognizes what I do. So I kind of did it that way. I didn't kind of think about it and go get an MBA or a lot of research. I'm a reform artist, I'm a jazz artist, right? So we tend to think in a different way. But you're saying
Yeah, I think it's a lot of us in the creator space in general, in the creative arts space in general, went down that path, right? I'll be honest with you. I started my podcast at the beginning of COVID because, well, I had time and I wanted to talk to people about what they were doing to survive. And, that was it, right? There was no forethought to it. There was no strategy to it. That all that came down the line. But what I learned from those moments, like you learn how to capitalize on those moments and take them into a space that generates revenue, that creates opportunities to talk to people that you may not always have access to otherwise, right? And that's, I think, when you're thinking about your content, when you're thinking about everything that you're doing in the marketing space, how are you creating those moments to talk to the people that will drive revenue and drive opportunity?
Yeah, I think it's really important to have a script, and then also if you're going to start getting into wanting people to come back, that you add value to your podcast. Like, do people want to watch your podcast? Like, what is the goal? It's like, oh, well, they just like me, well, maybe that's cool, because you can be personality based. You could
Yeah.
get you got YouTubers, a lot of, right, so they're TV personalities, they've got charisma, but if you're not
Mm-hmm.
like an don't
Yeah, I think we get stuck in this. I have to have a TV or radio voice to do all this stuff, right? I have to be this big personality, and the reality is there's something like 57,000 new and active podcasts right now. There's roughly 2.1 million podcasts worldwide, and we get stuck in this. I have to be in the top 10. You don't have to be in the top 10, right? You just have to create content that your audience,
Yeah.
the people that you want to talk to, cares about,
Yeah.
right? If you only want to talk to 100 people, cool, like go for it, because that's where your niche lives, right? If you want to talk to 10,000 people, what do those 10,000 people really want to hear from you? And those 10,000 people will find you.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think you have to love what you do, and then once you love what you do, then you get an audience, and then to kind of cultivate that audience and build it so that you get more engagement and get beyond that niche, right? Initially, it was
Mm-hmm.
only an independent musicians, right? Now I'm talking to somebody like you, right? That wasn't my original plan, but people beyond that. But I found the way podcasting since 2016, when I first started, I could just do musicians. What has shifted, I've had to start opening it up to entertainment, opening it up to, CEOs, SEO people, marketing group, shamans, all types of people. It just opened up to way wider than what I initially anticipated. And some people, I don't know if that's true. I mean, what would be your recommendation? I found that being in a narrow niche, it wasn't working.
Mm-hmm.
I had to actually open.
Yeah, I think it's niches are a great place to start, right? Because if you try and market to everybody right off the bat, very rarely will you talk to anybody, because your messaging is so it just isn't going to resonate with everybody. So I believe in starting with niches. But that being said, once you have put a foothold into that niche, you're right. You have to start, figure out, how do I expand this? How do I bring in more value so that other people want to come be a part of what I'm putting together? And, sometimes that looks like expanding, in the podcasting world, that may look like expanding topics. That could look like creating a second show, and utilizing your current listener base to kind of jumpstart the engagement for that. It could be starting a second YouTube channel, or creating a alternative YouTube strategy around, some different contents, maybe some behind the scenes stuff that's just hits in a different way than, than what you've traditionally done. And so, I always try and when I'm recording a podcast, I always try and have my phone up and record, just behind the scenes footage, all bearing that I can get my desk clean before I get to recording.
Yeah.
But it creates well, it's the same content, it creates a different view of it, right? And I
Yeah.
start that recording process before we get on, as I'm clicking around, setting things up, things like that. So people can kind of see that little bit of the behind the scenes. What does it look like as we're actually getting this thing put together, as we're having the conversation, post conversation, and you create some unique moments.
That's a good idea because I got multiple webcams and I just got subscriber ability to have subscribers on my Instagram. And so
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that we're going to do on the Instagram, just as an example, is like, okay, I write poetry, I write lyrics, right?
Yeah.
So when I get my subscriber base, I'm going to actually have poetry readings with the groups of people who subscribe, right? I've got a
That's awesome.
collection of poetry I can actually give away, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a subscriber only thing. I have multiple webcams, so I can actually film this show with other webcams while I'm doing it, and I'm actually doing that. So I'm creating that content, like you just said. So when I get my subscriber base, they're going to be able to see behind the scenes type of stuff, and they're
Yep.
going to be able to a different content than I would normally do. And that's why I figured I would focus for that kind of fan. It's like a fan club. Like musicians,
Mm-hmm.
we've had fan clubs for years. We have fanzines. We have things where we just give the hardcore audience, right? They get the special stuff. They get special singles nobody else gets. They get
Yep.
like vinyl nobody else gets. They get posters nobody else gets. It's just like a niche.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you talk about Instagram, right? The Facebook, obviously, you've got LinkedIn, you've got Twitter, you've got TikTok, and YouTube, and those are kind of the big social platforms. Yeah, and the one thing that I see a lot of people struggle with when we talk social media is how do I drive engagement on all the platforms, right? Because everybody's like, I want people from everywhere. I'm like, okay, but where are your people at now? And where else do they go? Right. Because like for me in business, like I spend a lot of time in Facebook because I work with a lot of people in the small business community, and Main Street America businesses live in Facebook. Right. But I also work with mid-sized companies that are a little bit bigger in scale. They don't live in Facebook. They live in LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So from a strategic standpoint, I don't worry about Instagram too much. I post there, but I don't worry about it. I don't worry about Twitter too much because it doesn't drive a whole lot of value for my business. So I pretty much am focused on Facebook and LinkedIn. Not to say that I don't put out content on other platforms, but it's
like
not.
The TikTok crowd is maybe not the crowd that you're going to pull.
Yeah. For me, the TikTok crowd is probably not the best crowd for me. Though there is a lot of opportunity there, and I've been doing a lot of reading about how to capitalize on that from a business perspective. But obviously music, arts, I love music. I love listening to all different types of music. And I would say probably 2 to 3 times a week, I discover some new artist or some new group that's, local, regional, and go find them on Spotify and
TikTok,
Apple Music. And,
Yeah,
after TikTok, after seeing them on TikTok, because I'm like, man, I saw this like 30-second clip. I want to listen to more. I want more from them,
they're like the underground college radio. Like
Mhm.
I'm a 55-year-old guy, right? And I was a radio guy on college radio. And college radio is how we used to break bands, right? Before
Yep.
MTV, before the internet.
Mhm.
College radio stations would get all this independent stuff from like IRS records and Sub Pop and all these small labels would target the college radio stations because it's like, hey, these guys are willing to play the new stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's how we got into it. And this where the SoundClouds of the world are now, are kind of
Yep.
that's the place. Like TikTok's the place, the reels are the place. So as a producer, I'm always encouraging, artists that I work with, like you got to go and do a reel. You got to go
Mhm.
do a TikTok. And they're like, well, I'm not into that because I'm not a comedian. Because a lot of people who are musicians, they're like, well, that's all comic. That's all comedy. And it's not true anymore because there's a lot of
No.
bands like you just mentioned are breaking. So you got to like get out of that mindset and say it's not just comedy. There's a lot of irreverent comedy. I do admit, but yeah, there are tons of bands breaking there. So
Yeah.
you got to try to get there.
Yeah, one of my favorite, I guess you could call them up and coming. They're starting to become a little bit bigger. Is the 502s,
Hmm.
and the lead guy plays banjo, and they're kind of like this country, like really lighthearted, upbeat music.
Hmm.
But it's not really a country vibe. It's kind of somewhere in the between.
Maybe
Um,
Americana, maybe a little bit
yeah.
of Americana, kind of like the old school band Dylan
Yep.
stuff, you know.
Yeah.
But
But they shoot all their videos like literally. They have one where they're all 7 of them are crammed into like a laundry room, like in an old country house, like, and they're sitting like on the washer and the dryer and just trying to fit into this space, like playing and just having a good time. And like that's how they shoot all of their TikTok videos, all their reels, because and it's like there's so much personality in those moments, and it's just like 30 or 45 seconds
yeah,
of
it's
their
very,
music, you, but it's
very
like there's so much personality there,
authentic.
it draws you in.
Yeah, if you're authentic. I mean, you can have stylized stuff, and there's room for that kind of MTV stylization, right? But there's a lot of
Hmm.
like, if you think about the punk movement or the grunge movement, even about Kurt Cobain and Eddie Vedder, the
Oh yeah.
reason that that really hit was before that things were very stylized. You had like the hair
Hmm.
bands, you had all these MTV bands, you had these corporate rock bands, and people got kind of burned out on the corporate rock bands because they all were kind of fake. That people
Yep.
love them, whatever. But the idea that you could be like, hey, I don't have to dress up, I don't have to have a costume, I'm just gonna sing because I'm honest, like the Kurt Cobain style, kind of like a Neil
Hmm.
Young. He was taking like what Neil Young did with Crazy Horse and going further with it, right? Having a
Yep.
punk aesthetic. That's I tell people like if you just come in, you don't even have to have the best guitar, the best mic, the best anything. Just come in and be honest, right? If you come
Hmm.
in and do an honest um thing, right? And it's a fourth take, right? You don't got to do 20, 30, 40 takes. If that fourth take is closer to what you really wanted, and by the time you get to the 50th take, you've taken all the heart out of it. And I was
Yep.
like, you know what? Sometimes you got to go with the early version. And I'm always telling people, it's like, yeah, we could do it on a dollar mic. That might if it's on a $200 mic sounds better just because it sounds more real. And that's where
Yeah.
people have to get to. Sometimes things are not being totally perfect. At least in art and music, sometimes it's actually the heart of it and the soul of it, and like a point in time thing that
Hmm.
actually is more important. It's just a different judgment.
Yep. I call that the lumpy mashed potato philosophy, right? Lumpy mashed potatoes, you can't get them out of a box. They're true and authentic, right? And because they're not perfectly smooth and perfectly blended and all that, right? And I try and latch onto that in the marketing space too when we're talking about brand messaging for people. Like, how do we create those lumpy mashed potato moments? How do we find those little gems of truly authentic
Hmm.
brand recognition?
Yeah, it's kind of creative. It's like you think about advertising, is like you think about the people who do commercials. It's like there's a lot of creativity in that, and it's art. And sometimes it's like art and science, but sometimes it's yeah, they just threw something at the wall and it worked,
Yep.
And it's like you can sit there and plan it, and the planned storyboarded thing doesn't work as good as the off the cuff. The actor goes and does something, you film it and say, hey, that actually works better. And somebody better spend all this time scripting it and storyboarding it, and then the actor kind of freeforms it, and they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, that is so much better. We'll go with that."
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Good Morning Vietnam,
Yeah.
but all the scenes in the radio booth with Robin Williams
Mhm.
doing the radio show, that
He was
was
act
100% ad lib. They
well, he
they
was
tried to
he was
write for it, and he wouldn't follow the script. He just did his own thing, and so they just started recording it. And obviously that's part of what makes that movie, I think, gold. In my opinion, is like just that authentic moments that you're like, I can totally see a hyped up crazy radio DJ like doing that.
yeah, it's more authentic. His idea with music too is like you can get into the production people, we can get on the bar, right? We can
Mm-hmm.
actually go on sheet music and write it out bar by bar, right? We can go into
Yep.
the DAW and do it bar by bar. But a lot of times, like I'll go and say somebody's like, would Greg Allman and Dickie Betts do it that way? Would they really do it, right? If you go back and listen to the Allman Brothers, they didn't do it like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
They did, Hendrix didn't do that. He just went and did it, right?
Yep.
And it's something about just being comfortable in your own skin as an artist or an actor or anything, even a painter. You just go with like what we say is like what the universe gives us, right? Because we channel stuff, right? So as
Mm-hmm.
being a musician, part of what you do is you channel feelings, experiences, what all the music I've ever listened to, all the whatever I watched on TV, it just comes out and then you put it down, and either it works or it doesn't. But that's the aesthetic, and then you have to work with people in marketing to kind of pick out, oh, what's really going to work. But when we write, that's how we write. But so it's always like you try to build purpose or trying to organize stuff. Being an artist is kind of like organized chaos.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you have to figure out how much control you want to have.
Yeah, I watched a PBS special quite a few years ago of Paul McCartney took and recreated by himself the entire White Album uh, on a 4-track recorder live in front of a studio audience.
Yeah, I saw that.
And it was just earth shattering to watch, just him pick up instruments and then align everything, real time. And like just watching that is an experience. And what I loved about that is it created an experience as a listener, right? And it made me honestly probably, it just enhanced my fandom for being Paul McCartney and a Beatles fan, from that moment, because I'm like, man, like just watching them take all of this energy and effort to do this.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing about guys like Paul and John Lennon. I mean, their original kind of song, they created kind of modern pop music for the fact
Mm-hmm.
that how much art they put into it, right? For being a teen, they were kind of like the original teen pop band, boy band.
Yep.
The Beatles were the original like boy band, but when they met George Martin gave them the discipline like he was a music professor, right? So he came in there and basically put them into school. The whole history of it, he actually taught them the music theory. He taught them how to use the studio as an instrument, understand what they're trying to do. And if you read the history of all the stuff they learned from him, it basically, it mentions the Beatles, or Dylan or Hendrix. They always mention they're like icons. But these guys, they really, they did and never goes that far, as far as they did.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing to
thing there.
It's absolutely amazing to me to see where we've come, and the fact that you can just now, just literally drop in sheet music, upload sheet music and assign instruments and get everything that you could possibly need out of it.
Yeah, there's still something about like I run into people who use the DAW, and I'm still kind of I'm an old school guy, so I use a lot of multi-tracks. I kind of go rail against the DAW because I think it takes, like I always point out to somebody, would you get Exile on Main Street in a DAW? Probably not.
Yeah.
I know. Would you get Bitches Brew out of a DAW? You probably wouldn't. So my whole point with people is like, yeah, you can create music, and it has a tendency to be a little too perfect. So what I try to tell people is the honesty of why you like those classic songs from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s is because they were done raw, right? They were done they have mistakes. That's one of the things they have to teach people. You go listen to old recordings and you really listen to them, they're full of errors. They're full of key change errors, timing errors. They're not perfect, right? The drummer's not perfect. They don't stay on time through the whole song. They don't. They don't stay in the same keys. They make a lot of mistakes. They're vocal mistakes. People have to understand that imperfection is part of the beauty of music, like any art. And that's where I have to get into people's head is sometimes perfection is actually not the goal.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's a different type of conversation. But I understand where we are, where artists have to understand that is, we're so creative. We have that creative chaos. We do have to get organized. We do
Mm-hmm.
have to start having plans. We do have to find a way. There's like, well, a lot of artists would like, well, I don't want to spend time on that. I'll go give it to somebody else because
Yeah.
like I'd rather be in the studio all day. But you do have if you're going to be independent and not, you're going to have to make some adjustments to how much time you're going to spend on certain things, right? So you're going to need to come like, well, how am I going to get likes and follows? How am I going to have a digital brand strategy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe we can kind of go now. So how as an artist, am I going to get those likes and follows if I engage on me?
Yeah. I think there's a few things at play here. One is, consistency. Social media is about consistency, right? So are you consistently putting out content? And it's not just here's my music content. It's, we did this thing together as a band. We just had the most amazing session in the studio. So it's bringing people into the experience of being part of the band and part of the music. So I think that's a big piece. The other thing that I think is we need to focus on where our listeners are at, right? So, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook are probably the three platforms I'd recommend that every musician have a strong presence on.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and obviously YouTube. YouTube is, it's a totally different beast than the other social media, but, colossally important as well for people to consume what you're doing.
Even like
And then,
SoundCloud. SoundCloud's where a lot of people start. They get
Mhm.
the underground movement there, and then you move forward.
Yep. And I think SoundCloud is good, but I think, you can see quicker response, right? Everybody says, oh, marketing's the long game, right? Well, there's things you can do, but in shorten that life cycle a little bit, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, maybe you have that SoundCloud presence, but if I take what I'm doing on SoundCloud and I start dropping snippets into the other social media and start driving the interest, maybe run some live, where we're just in the garage hanging out, playing music and streaming, right? Creating those moments in other social platforms sooner. We can see that path much more quickly. It doesn't have to be a long game, just has to be a
Yeah,
consistent game.
yeah. One of the things I started introducing even back in 2016 is doing live rehearsals
Mm-hmm.
on multiple media platforms. So on this
Yep.
platform, I'd run it to Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube,
Yep.
and I
Exactly.
got a whole audience that got into my process. I actually do brand new songs. I
Mm-hmm.
do off the cuff improvisational rehearsals, and then I'll cut them and stylize them and send them to TikTok and Reels and Instagram. And then from that, I've got producers. I had 2 Grammy Award winning producers come to me and say they liked what I was doing.
Yeah.
Um, and I actually got them to come on my podcast. Now, I wasn't even trying to get them to come on my podcast,
Mm-hmm.
but they saw an Instagram post. Billy Hume, who worked with the lead singer of the Goo Goo Dolls and Lil Jon, I got him on my podcast. And we did an hour-long conversation because he liked one of my videos that I did off the cuff.
Yeah.
And so that kind of shows you, like, if you just put yourself out there, you never know what's gonna happen. So
Exactly. Exactly. And then I think the other thing that we forget about, is that a website, regardless of how big of a musician you are, a website is an important piece of this, and where you can create the opportunities for people to engage further, sign up for your newsletter,
mhm.
even if you're not putting out a newsletter. Put sign up for my newsletter on your website and start collecting email addresses, sooner than later.
You think a
Creating.
newsletter is better than a blog? Like, I do a blog, and there's a blogger page on my website, and
Mhm.
then I have a blog, and they always put blogs out consistently, like 3, 4 times a week.
Yeah.
But I never thought of doing the newsletter because I thought, well, I already do the blog. But you think it's like not redundant?
So I don't think it's redundant. I think what you structure your newsletter to drive traffic to the blog, right?
Okay.
Where you're winning well with a newsletter is you're collecting people's information, right? You're
Oh,
collecting ways to actually connect with people, other than hoping that they come to your website, right? And so, that's, you now own their names and their email addresses because they signed up for your newsletter.
okay. You think email still gets good engagement, or is text better than email?
It depends. It depends what you're trying to drive. I think for a regular presence, email newsletters still are a phenomenal tool because you can put links to multiple different pieces of content or things that you have going on in there. Where text, I think, is a little more purpose driven. I might send a text if I was a musician out to, hey, we're going to be at so and so bar Friday night,
Yeah.
8 o'clock. Like, that's a great opportunity for text, where a newsletter is going to be a little bit slower burn on that. So you have to like lead that out further. And so I think they both have their place. You just have to figure out which
Yeah.
work for your audience. And this is
So
the
you think
other piece.
so you think text is good for like scheduling or letting people know, okay, I'm gonna be at this signing. I'm gonna
Hmm.
be at the concert, right? I'm gonna be
Yeah.
on TV. Like if you want to have something scheduled, that the text is a better way
Yep.
of getting people to know about it than the slower burn on the newsletter is for something like deeper content, right?
Yep. Yeah. Album drop, is another great one, right? For text, like, hey, album drop at 10 a.m. next Tuesday, use the
Mhm.
link below to pre-order your copy. Like, that's like a gold, it's a great way to
Are there
drive.
preferred tools for that? I mean, do you go to a person like you to get something like that, or do you actually tell people where to go, where the best tools for that type of thing are?
So there are thousands and thousands of tools out there, and they all offer a little bit different thing. And I'm very, 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 very insistent that I will never recommend one single tool.
Okay.
In fact, I'm very, very selective about who my affiliate partners are as well,
Mhm.
because I work with people in the building and trades industry a lot. I work with people in small business, Main Street America. I work with corporations that have, hundreds of employees. And the tools that I would recommend for a roofer versus, a call center that's
Yeah,
got,
definitely.
got a site, are going to be drastically different, right? And so, I always say do the research on the tools. There's tons of them out there.
Mhm.
Find the tools that are going to give you. I look for a couple of things, right? So one is, can I afford it? That's always where I start. Can you afford this? And it's not just can you afford this month. If this is a year down the road, can you still afford this tool, right?
Mhm.
If nothing else changes, are you okay with that investment? The second piece is I always look at feature sets, right? Obviously SMS, but if they have email campaign tools built into that platform as well, now you can use one tool for two different things for
Multiple things, yeah.
yeah. So I look at those kind of feature sets. So is there a tool that has email and SMS? There's a ton of them out there, right?
And can you get stats from some of these on the engagement? Like the
Oh
one
yeah.
I would want is I wanna know, okay, you did this, but how many people actually hit it,
Hmm.
right? Can you
Yeah.
track that? Can you tell me that they actually hit the link, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. We code links so that you can see it in analytics. We code
Mhm.
links so that you can see it within the email or the SMS platform that you're using.
Mhm.
It is very, very easy to track a lot of that, though. The new Facebook and Apple security stuff is making that
Harder.
slightly more difficult. It's changing the game a little bit, and I think from a consumer perspective, in a good way. But it's all there. You
Okay.
just You have to know, you have to look at it. I don't know a single platform that doesn't have some sort of analytics integrated into it. But you're looking for things like how many people actually opened it. So that's open rate, You're also looking for click-through rate as well. So any links you have in the email, did they click on any one of those links? And that click-through rate is a comparison of how many people opened it versus how many people actually opened it and clicked on a link.
Yeah, and then you have to kind of try to convert that to like, okay, if somebody was going to buy like the sales, you got to convert. Like they click through, did they actually put their credit card in or PayPal? Did they actually buy it? Does anybody ever go that far to tell you that they actually went and bought it?
Yeah. So that's tying everything together, right? So that you're going to use not only your email or SMS software to track what happened with that campaign, but then you're going to go into your Google Analytics and we set up conversions in our Google Analytics. And basically what that means is when they buy a product and they hit a certain page, that gets marked as a conversion. And so we look at conversion rate and we go, okay, we use these set of links and we had a 40% conversion rate or a 30% conversion rate off of this set of links, and that was driven from this campaign. And so we tie all that data together.
Then with all that information, you could actually determine like, is this profitable? Does this actually make sense? Is it, because I'm paying X amount, how much did I get in for how much I put in? How much I put out, because at the end of the day, look, I ran this for a year and I don't actually see a good return on my investment. I don't see the engagement. I don't see the numbers. So maybe I got to switch gears and do something else. But maybe you got to do it faster than that. Maybe you don't want to take a year to do that. Like, would you do it based on a month, 2 months, quarter? What's your return?
Yeah. So typically, if we run a campaign, we're going to run usually 3 to 6 messages through that campaign, right? So what I mean by that is, every person is not going to just receive one email or one text message. They're going to receive a string. Text messages is usually 2 or 3. Emails is as many as 6 or 7 over a period of time. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking at that campaign and I'm going, okay, so email 1 did this and yielded these results. Email 2 did this and yielded these results. Email 3. And now I'm going to look at that not only from an individual email perspective or an individual SMS perspective. Now I'm going to look at the campaign performance as a whole. And typically those campaigns are going to run, typically I'd say anywhere from 14 to like 25 days is kind of that range. I mean, you set it up and you tailor it depending on what you're trying to do, when things are falling, when things like an album is launching, things like that, what that all looks like. But we look at it individually and campaign and we go, what worked, what didn't work, right? Because if we just look at the campaign, we can go, well, we only yielded a 10% conversion on this whole campaign. Cool. That's, we want to see more than that. We know there's some opportunity there. But then we go look at the individual and we go, well, email 3 saw a 40% conversion while everything else saw nothing. So what did we do in email 3 that worked? Right. And now we can actually create the next campaign based on what worked on email 3 and go, how do we create 7 of those emails? Right. And so it's kind of a long game, right?
I work in that cool situation. I mean, that's the with getting attention, know how you're actually doing, and I guess the sooner you know it, the faster you can course correct.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. And
yeah, right, because the better, the more real time your results are, that you get that information back to you, then you don't have to take months or weeks or I guess you froze there for a second.
Yep.
Oh, sorry. Did you have a little technical issue? Okay.
Yeah,
But
I had a
yeah, I was
little
listening,
glitch
but
there. I apologize.
that's okay. But yeah, I think the course correction capability is really important because like a lot of times you put the record, you let the vendor tell you if people were actually you have to return it to the company or not because you didn't sell it. Now because you've got streams, digital information. You didn't have to wait for the paper records from the stores to come back. You can get immediate feedback
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
on what's.
mean, that's the great thing of the online platforms, right? Is you can see immediately, 24 hours, you can see, what is this going to do? Are people receptive to it? Are people not receptive to it? 48 hours, 72 hours, now we can look at this daily. I think that we have to be smart about how we look at it, though, and not be obsessive about it. Obviously, I like to look at marketing, in the 24-hour, the 7-day, and then the 30-day window, right? What happened in the first 24 hours. This is especially true with like email campaigns, SMS campaigns. That's when most of the activity happens. But then we look at it as a whole from an activity perspective. Did people go back to it? What did we see at 7 days? Did we see any improvement? And then what are we seeing at 30 days with the overall brand, right? Are we seeing more engagement because of this activity?
Yeah, I guess you got to give it time. It's like with music sometimes. Like sometimes, like the day you put it out, you got all your hardcore fans that get it, right? So you could get
Mm-hmm.
like your total fan base could suddenly get it, and all your numbers are peaking, and then it drops off until it can get to another audience. So it's got to be able to
Yep.
get in the engagement, sometimes like it's weird with like that. Suddenly you're like, oh, Australia suddenly likes it, and like 15 days after it just goes crazy. You're like, well, I didn't even predict that, right? Because it's like
Mm-hmm.
it's art, so you don't know. So like you could jump the gun and say, well, I want to put all my attention into this country or that country or whatever. But sometimes you kind of gotta let it go and then say, oh, that's where we should tour because that's where everybody is listening now. So I got to go to Iceland. I got to go to the Netherlands. Like you kind of go where it hits. But
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And that's it, right? So how are you talking to those people and where it's hitting? And where is it resonating and where is it not resonating? And then the bigger question to ask is, where it's not resonating, why is it not resonating? Right? Because that's going to provide you do I even spend time, effort, or energy in that segment?
Yeah,
Right?
because sometimes it's not a scene there. I mean, when it comes to music, sometimes your scene is kind of regionalized.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're an electronic musician, like you got a big scene in Los Angeles, big scene in New York, get to the Midwest, you might not kick, right?
Yep.
Then you may have to hit like Berlin. You might have to hit. So you start hitting outside the US because you start hitting those zones where EDM trance, that's where people like it, right? So you're
Yep.
not going to hit it in Albuquerque, maybe not, but
Mm-hmm.
you might hit it in Morgantown, but you hit it in Berlin, you might hit it in Australia, you might hit it, in Iceland or Latvia.
Yeah.
You never know. But that's kind of like, do you waste a Google ad campaign trying to hit Iowa when
Mm-hmm.
everybody really is in Europe or Asia?
Yeah, no, and that's exactly right. I think, going back to what I said earlier, if we try and talk to everybody, we actually end up talking to nobody, right? So, so it's how do we identify where the people are at, who they are, and what they love, so that we can talk to them specifically, because the marketing that we connect with and the advertising that we connect with is the advertising that feels like it's speaking to us directly. You think about it like, I don't know if you get, spam sales pitches in your social media. I get a ton of them,
Yeah.
and they're just like, we can help you with, low cost virtual assistants from all over the world. I'm like, Yeah, but I don't need low cost virtual assistants from all over the world. Like if you read like my stuff, like that's not what I'm about. I'm about
Yeah,
providing a higher level experience that isn't going to come from, a $5 an hour VA from Vietnam that can, barely speak English, right? So,
yeah.
and not to say that there isn't a space for all of that, because there is. It's just not in my business,
Yeah,
but the
you have to.
ones that I respond to are the ones that are like, hey, so I saw your post about this, this, and this, and I was really interested in how you talked about this. Let's have a conversation.
Okay, so
Right?
they actually know something. You know that they actually look at what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the whole thing with music. Like if somebody comes to me and says they're going to market me, but then they can't tell me what their favorite song is in my catalog, and then they can't tell me like where they would pitch me based on my style,
Yep.
and they just come with some kind of generic thing. I'm going to be like, well, you don't even really know who I am. So how am I going to engage with you? Like I really think that the people, if you're going to do that kind of marketing, what you're saying is that you do need to know the client, right?
Hmm.
You should probably do a little research, read about what they do, find something that you like, and kind of be able to talk to them about it, so that they'll trust you more if they
Yep.
realize that you actually have actually done a little bit of research.
Yeah, and to translate this into the music scene, right? So, in the music scene, we take this and we go, okay, so let's look at the breakdown of where people are listening to your music. What's their age group? What's their economic status, right? Is it a global audience? Is it a not global audience? The way you talk to somebody in Europe is going to be a bit different than the way you talk to somebody in the US versus the way you talk to somebody in the Asia Pacific. And so we have to stop and we have to go, okay, so we know that we have this core group in major metropolitan areas in the United States that is between 25 and 35, and they're just starting families, and they're just starting, they're just getting into their careers, right? So now we can look at this and we can go, okay, as a musician, if I talk about my family and my kids a little bit, I can connect with these people that are just starting families and just getting started in life, because it's like we can talk about all the cool things that my kids are accomplishing.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
you have a connection. Yeah, yeah, we do have to connect with the audience. It's like
Mhm.
with like I've heard the example we had the advertiser or marketer trying to connect with the client. Like that,
Yep.
you have to know what your audience is interested in, right?
Yep,
So
exactly.
if
So
you're not selling them what they want, then they're gonna disengage.
yeah, and we have to be human about it too, and that we talked about that a little bit earlier as well. It's how do we create this humanistic approach? People want to be sold, but they don't want to be sold to. So because that's a very cold experience. So how do we
Yeah,
connect with people on this human level where it becomes almost, dare say it, a relationship with that person on a more personal level? And we do that through, making sure that our messaging feels human, right? It doesn't feel like a robot typed it out. We're creating genuine moments. This is why I love video content, right? Even if it's not your music
hmm,
playing, but just video content in general. Um, I for a hot minute despised the walking down the sidewalk in my neighborhood videos on my cell phone videos, like, because they were all over the place. But then as I started to think about it, I'm like, those are real moments. Like, hey, I'm just out on my morning walk. I was thinking about this. I thought I'd share this with you, right? It's
yeah,
like a real moment that
yeah.
makes you
Like
feel like a human. And
one of the things
so,
yeah. One of the
so,
things I like, yeah, what I started encouraging artists I work with was like, "Oh, why don't you show them when you're like cooking?" Like, so
mhm,
I started like people making pancakes, people baking cookies, you know. So you don't really see like an EDM artist or some kind of like rock artist. Oh, yeah, I'm baking cookies today. So it's not something you normally would associate. So if you show them you being more human, right? You're
mhm,
actually you're baking a cake. You're like,
yeah,
oh, but you're like some big metalhead, but you're baking a cake. It's like they think that, wow, I didn't expect that.
yeah. It's all about those personality moments, right? In Guy Fieri, Food Network star, right? He's created a brand around human moments, right? He talks a lot about food, but he came to the scene in Diners, Drive-ins, and Dives, which was all about the people behind these iconic places in Main Street America, that were doing great things, and he's continued that throughout his persona, and now he's brought his kids into it, and he brings other chefs into it, and it's all about cooking, but it's all about the stories around cooking.
Well, it's like a real life experience. It's not just like
Mm-hmm.
watching like the old school like Julia Childs, doing her thing. But yeah, I'm kind of it dates me. But one of the things I also think is cool is like if you think about kind of sales experience. I remember like growing up in the '70s and the Fuller Brush band coming to the house,
Mm-hmm.
and then the fact that my mom would let them in and actually usually would buy something
Yeah.
because that technique, like the old vacuum sales people that would, because it was personal, because
Mm-hmm.
these are guys that are sales guys, but they figured out in the house talking, they usually could sell something,
Yep.
and because it was a relationship. It wasn't just watching it on TV. They actually were in the house and they let you try it. And as a kid, I saw that. I said, "Well, wow, that's different than the TV commercial. This
Mm-hmm.
is like somebody actually like here with the product, and I get to try it." And I don't know if people even do that anymore because of COVID, um, but yeah, I think that was like a hands-on thing. I kind of
Yeah.
learned a little bit.
Yeah, it's that tactile moment. So they use it still quite a bit in the home services industry. So like roofing and like pest control, remodelers, they still use that technique a lot, and it's great because you're at somebody's house, you're talking about especially a house, right? It's their
Mhm.
most prized possession. It's the most expensive thing that anybody owns is their house. So of course they want to do everything they can to take care of it. And so when you're in front of them and you can talk about how we can help you protect your most valuable asset, now all of a sudden it's a different conversation than Joe the roofer calls me up on the phone, and I see this number I've never recognized, don't know
Yeah,
what it is, and I'm like, well, okay, maybe I'll answer it, right? And you answer it and you go, hi, I'm Joe the roofer, I want to talk to you about your roof, and you're like, but you don't even know what my roof looks like.
yeah. It's like my dad was the thing. My dad was an insurance agent, and he had
Hmm.
to do those cold calls, but he really liked actually doing like he ended up doing research to figure out who was an agent, like go up the real estate right, and then go try to find the new homeowners,
Yep.
and then against you probably need to cover your lives. You need to cover that car. You need to cover that, and then he was able to actually get really good engagement because he did the research to figure out where the new homeowners were, figure out where kids
Hmm.
were going to school, get all kinds of data. He started doing all kinds of data, and he got really good at it. Like where you can take those kind of techniques and use them. It was like he was using fact-based information, using
Hmm.
information he could get, and better than just doing a cold calls. Because what the cold calls is like it wasn't getting me anywhere.
Yeah. No, I did a campaign for a
Oh,
roofer where we
but
actually worked on strategically shifting his whole mindset around canvassing. And we went into the city records and looked at the real estate records, and we found all the developments that were between 14 and 20 years old, and said, you go canvas all of these, because all of these are right prime for new roofs, and
that's a good
instead of just a spray and pray
place. Yeah.
strategy. And then the other thing we did is we looked at all the permits that were pulled in the last year in those areas, because it's all public record, and we go, okay, so we know that there's 26 houses in this neighborhood of 120 houses that have all had their roof redone in the last year. Here's who pulled the permit, and so you can go talk to them about other services that you offer but don't offer a roof. And all of a sudden in those areas, when we started that really targeted canvassing strategy,
Smart. Yeah.
um, all of a sudden he
Yeah.
went from closing about 30% of his roofs to closing like almost 70% of his roofs because, well, now we're in an engaged audience that needs a roof.
Well, I think that's also, I think part of our district we don't tend to go over, but I think we had a really good conversation. We actually went over, and I think it's really that this is information I think that any business person can use, whether you're an artist or you're doing any kind of thing, that you could always increase your capability. And I think you pointed out things in terms of preparation, plan, and research that I think anybody that's in the business of podcasting or any business can take a lot of good advice from. I'm very happy that you were here today. I think a lot of people benefit from a replay of this and listening to what we said. So I thank you for being on the program.
Appreciate you for having me. Really do.
Well, thank you. Have a good day. Have a good rest of the day.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.